Welcome to the Nano Entrepreneurship Network podcast, where entrepreneurs who have transitioned ideas into the marketplace share some of the lessons they have learned and insights they've gained while navigating the technology development pathway. I'm Lisa Friedersdorf, Director of the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office. Today, I am joined by Jason Hartlove, CEO of Nanosys, a California-based company manufacturing quantum dots for displays and other applications. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. To get us started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be the CEO of Nanosys?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lisa. It's a real pleasure to be here and to have a chance to talk about nanotechnology and our roadmap to where we are today and how we got here. For me personally, I am an electrical engineer by training and background. After UCLA, I came to work in Silicon Valley at Hewlett-Packard. I worked on a variety of different optical semiconductor products and commercializing them first within what was known as the Optical Communication Division of HP, and then eventually within HP Labs and many other divisions. This group really was focused on optical semiconductors and networking types of products. I developed some of the earliest versions of optical sensing, including the optical mouse sensor, which I was fortunate to be able to be the inventor of, and brought that to market for Hewlett-Packard, selling over 1 billion devices. After Hewlett-Packard and Agilent Technologies, I moved to South Korea, where I was president of a newly formed company called Magnachip Semiconductor, which was formed by purchasing the system LSI business of Hynix, a large memory semiconductor manufacturer. We set that up as an independent company, servicing the display industry with display drivers, as well as image sensors and many other electronic components. And following that, I came back to Silicon Valley, where after I'd been living in Seoul for several years, and found Nanosys, which had been a nanotechnology company that was started in 2001 and was kind of looking for a pathway to market, but hadn't yet found one. And I reviewed the technology portfolio that the company had, which was really very extensive, and could see that there were a few things that the company had which really looked very promising as far as being able to meet unmet needs in the marketplace and be very compelling in terms of providing a solution. So I proposed that this is the path we should go upon to the investors and the board there at Nanosys, and they agreed, and we've been working on that pathway ever since.
So I'd like to get your thoughts on intellectual property. So you talked about the portfolio that the company had, and I imagine that intellectual property holdings was part of that portfolio. Can you talk a little bit about the IP strategy that Nanosys has used?
Yeah, so our original scientific founders and entrepreneurs had in mind that it was really important to build a very strong intellectual property moat, if you will, around whatever area we were going to practice in. And so there was a tremendous amount of IP that had been filed in those early days. Some of it was at universities, some of it was at advanced research institutions around the world, and some of it was in private industry. And what we did was we went out and licensed a lot of that into Nanosys. And, a lot of that IP that's early on, that's very fundamental, can be very broad, which is great. But at the same time, you really need to begin to, as you move towards commercialization, tailor the filings and the claims and what you're trying to cover to be specific to particular applications and industries and things like this. So as an example, in the quantum dot space, one of our key founders, scientific founders, is Paul Alivisatos. And Paul, out of UC Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, he had worked extensively on the technology for what is known as molecular probes. And so molecular probes is sort of a fancy way of saying that you're going to use quantum dots to specifically dye cells and look at molecules within cells and within cellular imaging. Now, this is a great application because quantum dots are very, very tiny, unlike conventional dyes, fluorescent markers, and things like this that are used to study cells. And they also have a very long lifetime, meaning that the scientist or laboratory technician can really conduct their work over a period of time and still see the marker on the particular cell or molecule that they've tagged. But this has nothing at all to do with electronics or displays or lighting, et cetera. And so, we really needed to start to evolve the IP claim structures to be more well-suited towards the application field that we were going to exploit. Paul's early patents, of course, also covered, and Munji Buendi and many other people whose patents we licensed in, they covered fundamental material construction of quantum dots. They covered synthetic methods of quantum dots as well. And so those were great, but we needed to start to tailor them into the specific fields that we were targeting. And so that became part of our strategy. At the same time, Nanosys as a company had been founded with a lot of nanotechnology IP brought into the company, covering a wide variety of different types of nanostructures, a wide variety of potential application fields. And these were not going to be areas that we could practice all of. And so it became necessary to really start to look at what we were going to be able to succeed in, and those areas where we were not, to begin to either find other people who could potentially make use of the technologies, and so we could sub-license those or sell the license rights to those other types of technologies to other companies so that they could exploit them, or to just simply abandon them and turn them back to their original patent owners for those patent owners to go and find other companies or other entities that could potentially make use of them. So, this was all what we were doing was focusing on the particular areas we were going to commercialize, customizing and tailoring and really looking at how the intellectual property could be used within the particular fields and areas that we were going after, making sure we had strong protection in the way the materials would be used in those particular fields, and at the same time being relatively judicious about how we were spending our money and not spending it just on a lot of very interesting intellectual property that didn't have anything to do with the core business areas that we were going to practice in.
Did the fact that you came from more of a semiconductor type background influence or lead to the pivot to other applications like consumer electronics?
Yeah, no question it did. And I think that the board, made the choice to select me as the second CEO of the company with that in mind. One of the things that is very important in developing any technology is really having a clear understanding of how it fits particular unmet needs in the market and what the really best product market fit is for that technology. So the people who had been developing the quantum dot technology were really coming from this biological medical device sort of space. And they had no background in physical sciences, in electrical engineering, in the kind of electronic products space. At the same time, Nanosys as a company, despite this being sort of the DNA of the founders and some of the early scientists that were hired within the company, was trying to develop a variety of what I would call physical sciences type products. So we're trying to develop a solar cell, for example, based on another nanotechnology that we had in the company, without really understanding the specifics of what the solar cell industry manufacturing processes were, how products got to market, what the requirements were in terms of how these materials would be processed and the yields and throughputs and all the rest of this. And I think this made it very difficult for them to be successful with that type of development project. At the same time, I wouldn't be the best person to develop a medical device. So, what I saw in quantum dots was that they have a very unique, specific emission characteristic, unlike any other material that's out there. So still to this day, we've not discovered any other material like quantum dots that have the ability to have near unity internal quantum efficiency at any wavelength of emission that we want them to have based on how we synthesize them. That's very, very unique. And so what you need is to find applications where that kind of specific narrowband emitter is really important. And those are all in electronics. When we look at these other application spaces, people thought, well, maybe they're good for security inks or, being used in biological applications, et cetera. And many people have tried these application spaces for sure, but there's never been the uptake. The only successful real uptake of quantum dots has been in displays and television so far. And that's because it is such an incredibly perfect fit. This is an area that uses LEDs extensively today, or has used LEDs extensively in the past, but has not been able to use LEDs to make a perfect product. They've left a lot of potential efficiency gains on the table. They've left a lot of color performance on the table. And what we're able to do with quantum dots is really recognize that. So we're able to make perfect red, green, blue emitters instead of a white emitter. This allows for displays to really have the color fidelity, but also the efficiency that you can only achieve with a narrowband red, green, blue emitter. So yeah, I knew a lot about that. I'd worked in display technology before. It made me a good candidate for this particular exploitation, if you will, of the technology in this space. And we've done very well with it.
So what is the makeup of your technical team?
Within the company, we have a lot of chemists, some chemical engineers, a few material scientists, a couple of physicists. So, we're really looking at the materials as what is our core capability set. So how do we make the very best quantum dots? How do we continually improve the synthetic methods to make them have higher efficiencies, to use lower cost materials, more commonly available materials, more commonly available precursors, and also continue to have better and better performance as far as what the application needs are. And so that means we've got a very heavy emphasis on these materials. At the same time, we need to have some level of system understanding so that we can deal with the integration challenges associated with taking these materials into the desired end use. So we have definitely a very multidisciplinary team. It's not just organometallic chemists making quantum dots. We've got a lot of polymer chemists, organic material specialists, and then we work very extensively with our partners through whom we go to market. And so there's, again, a deep working relationship there by which we can access expertise in these fields like inks and resins and other types of compounds that are going to be ultimately the binders or the carrier system that the dots are going to be dispersed in.
Another topic that prospective entrepreneurs are certainly anxious to learn more about is raising capital. Do you have any advice for people who are interested in following a similar path with regards to raising capital and talking to investors?
Yeah, so I think what's really critical, and this is true whether or not I think about how I tried to get my projects funded when I was in large companies, or here at a small company, a startup company, trying to get investment capital from venture capitalists or strategic partners. It's really critical to be able to demonstrate in whatever form that's required that you have something that is far superior to any solution that the target customer can access today. And so if that's a software product, then it needs to be able to have the minimum functionality to demonstrate that. If it's hardware, if it's nanotechnology, you have to be able to not just have sort of a PowerPoint demonstration of this. You have to really be able to show it to people. And so for us, this came in the form of actually building the first optical films using quantum dots. We were able to do that at a relatively small budget. And once we had that in place and we could actually show that, my team and I were able to actually scale that up a little bit and make a prototype of a display. We just took an off-the-shelf display, we tore it apart, we retrofit it with our optical film, and we put it in there, and we took it to the display industry's largest trade show, and it just caught fire. We won the Best in Show award at the event, and 3M, came forward, wanted to be our partner. We showed it to a variety of people who came by. They all saw just how much better the color could be, how much brighter it could be. And that launched our first product, which was the Amazon Kindle Fire in 2013. So once you have that, everybody becomes interested. And if you don't have that, it's really a big lift for people's imagination. And so, yeah, is that going to work? Is that not going to work? I don't know. There's a lot of challenges, so people are looking for that proof of concept. And I think that's really critical to get to as quickly as you possibly can and spending as little as you possibly can to get there. And sometimes that takes a lot of different form factors. I worked with a bunch of different firms over the years. You can have that in multiple parts. You can have a part that demonstrates what the solution is going to do, but it doesn't have the form factor of the final thing. And you can have a separate part that demonstrates the form factor. People can get over that, but if you have nothing, if you just have kind of a concept that you're going to sort of illustrate, it becomes a lot more difficult for people to get their heads fully around how that can be better or different. Simulations, demonstrators, physical prototypes, software prototypes, these are really critical.
I understand that Nanosys had some SBIR awards in the early days, and that you're also partnering with Ubiquity, a spinout from the Department of Energy's Los Alamos National Lab. Can you share your perspective on the role of federal R&D funding to early technology development?
Yeah, so I was not here during the period of time when Nanosys was able to use its SBIR grants to further some of the development work that it was doing. But I know that it was critical from the history that's been relayed to me. I can tell you more about what I've observed with Ubiquity, because they are a key partner of ours and we are an investor in their company. This SBIR money and the federal program participation has really been very valuable for them. So they've been able to build those types of prototypes that we're talking about based on these programs. And that has given them data which they can now share with potential investors, with potential customers, showing why their solution works, how it works, and be able to even quantify how well it performs relative to incumbent solutions or technologies that people may have. So I do think it's really critical. And also, I've worked with a couple of other companies out of Caltech and other places, just sort of incubator startup type enterprises. And again, those abilities to access the university's infrastructure to be able to do this type of work, to really show how these novel materials are able to perform better than incumbent technologies, and benchmark those and use the NREL kind of certifications and these types of things. These are very, very meaningful. And once you have those, again, now you have some credibility that your solution, albeit it's not commercial, albeit there may still be a long way to go to make it get to be commercial, you've shown and can show how it has the potential to create a large amount of value for investors and also for society. And so, I think that these types of programs are really, really important. In Nanosys' case, we used, SBIR money to develop some of the first heavy metal-free quantum dot technology, which is currently the dominant form of quantum dots in the world today. And I can't say for sure if we would have not developed those if we didn't have the SBIR money, but I know for sure that it certainly did help make sure that we did do that development work. And also we had a DOE project as well to develop those materials, which was also very instrumental in helping us in those early days.
And I think perhaps some of the patent portfolio that you've licensed from universities, and that likely also had federal funding that supported the R&D that led to that.
Absolutely, without any doubt, it did. We've been intimate with that portfolio and exactly the legacy of the programs that Dr. Alivisatos and Dr. Buendia and many others did over the years with those federal funds and programs that they did, whether it was the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, or other entities within the government.
So, Jason, when you think back over your career, Is there any particular advice that you received from a mentor that has really had an impact on your work?
Yeah, I thought about this question a little bit, and a good mentor and friend of mine told me one time that the customers vote with their dollars. And so people will tell you all kinds of great things. They want to encourage you, they might like you, et cetera, but people vote with their money. And so, this has just been a very important thing for us and for me in my career to pay attention to. What are the things that people actually want to invest in? What resonates with them? And ultimately, what do consumers really put the value on that you're delivering? Whoever your consumer is, whether that's a B2B sort of enterprise or selling to the military or selling to actual end users.
So I have one final question for you today, and that is, can you talk about a decision that you made that, looking back, maybe you would have done in a different way?
Yeah, in terms of Nanosys in particular, the company had a lot of different technologies that it was gifted by the vision of the founder. And this was too much, really, for a company of our size and stature to be able to digest and really make into productive pursuits out there in the marketplace. When I look back, I ultimately made the decisions around what to divest from at Nanosys, but I feel like I may have waited too long in a couple of those cases. And so I think that one of the things one has to balance is hesitancy and sort of wanting to make sure that things really aren't going to play out, and how can I maybe get a little more upside if I do hang on to this other piece of technology, versus just really being brutal about the focus and driving all the resources into a particular area. I do feel like it would have been possible, had I done that a little more quickly. It may have been possible to bring the quantum dot technology to market sooner than we did. Hindsight's always 20/20, but that would be the thing that I'd say is, just really, really focus and be very conscious about what you're getting distracted by, and really ask yourself questions driven by data. Are these things that are really going to pan out? And, really focus on the things that matter.
Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Do you have any closing thoughts that you want to share, or perhaps advice for students?
Well, advice for students, I think material science and physical sciences are super important right now, more so than ever before. We've just got so many really significant challenges to overcome as far as what we're doing in pollution and being able to have cleaner energy, being able to have cleaner water, cleaner air. And the route to all of these is really going to be in new materials and new technologies. And how can we really discover these unless we have all of you doing what you're doing? And I'm just very proud of you for pursuing these fields. And I know that there's a lot of glow and luster around things like the cloud and Web3 and all the rest of this. But I have to say that this is the most significant thing that you could potentially do with your life, is to really dig in and help humanity solve some of these big challenges that are going to come from material science and physical sciences work.
If you are interested in joining the Nanotechnology Entrepreneurship Network, please go to nano.gov/nanoentrepreneurship network or email nen@nnco.nano.gov.